Thanks for joining me again. Facebook still has me locked out. Be patient. We'll see what happens. I don't know if they're going to let me get the page up and running again. I certainly hope so. It had gotten a lot of action, a lot of comments, a lot of likes, a lot of activity. Personally, I really need that forum. I have a lot, going on. Obviously, we all do, and that's why we're here. So I really hope that they get it up and running for me again soon. I've had a lot of people ask, and there's always talk about when you first meet a narcissist, the love bombing and, all the charm, romance, and things like that. That's not really what happened in my situation. What did happen, I was very young. I was a very young mom. I had my first child when I was just 18, and his father was killed when he was a month old on a motorcycle. I didn't meet the narcissist until the following year, and I think it is fair to say that at the time I was emotionally compromised, probably not thinking clearly, very easily influenced. And so that's when I met the narcissist that I was married to for 24 years. So it wasn't typical. We were not together very long, just a matter of a few months before we got married. It was my idea. I did not get a proposal. I didn't get romance. I didn't get anything of that sort. And I was so emotionally compromised that I didn't even notice it at the time. I think because of the trauma of losing my eldest son's father, I don't really recall a lot from those first couple of years. It's all pretty foggy. It's all pretty blurry. I think that's what happens when you do experience something traumatic. Just like when I lost my father last year, there are certain details and things that I don't even recall when I talk about it, with my kids or something. They'll mention something. I'm like, wow, I don't even remember that happening. I don't remember that going on. I was very engrossed in my father's care and what he needed and knowing that I was losing him. So the details escape you, but we were both very young. I don't know. I mean, that was one of the things when we went to counseling. The counselor said, well, what made the two of you fall in love with each other? What brought you together? And we both sat in silence. I know where I was at that point in my life, and I know what affected me and what was affecting my decisions. I don't know what his thoughts were. I don't know what his excuse is. I do know that once I was in it, I was dedicated. I was loyal. I do know that as young as I was, my family was everything to me. My kids were everything to me. He was everything to me. There wasn't anything I wasn't going to do for all of them. And unfortunately, it just wasn't the same for him. I knew something was missing. I knew I wasn't really happy. So it was easy for him to say, that I was depressed, or it was because I hadn't dealt with the loss of his father, or being my son's father, or I was comparing them. He would say, I'm not him, and I'm not going to be like that, and so on and so forth. So he always had some sort of an excuse to fall back on, and I just knew I wasn't being loved. I knew I wasn't being cared for the way I wanted to be. But he always made it seem like I was asking for too much. He always made it seem like I was going over the top and being over dramatic and over emotional and so on and so forth. And then I would feel guilty. I would feel guilty because I would think to myself, I'm asking for too much. I'm asking for something that isn't practical. I just began to accept where I was and who I was with, and I gave it my everything. I still gave it my all. But over the years, I could still sense something was missing. And I just still kept at it. I stayed dedicated. I tried. When it became too much and I was being pulled in all directions, as a mom, as a wife, helping out with the kids, coaching and doing all the things that you do as a parent, and trying to be a good daughter, whatever life was asking me at the time, I would have these meltdowns. He would say I was crazy. He would say I needed medication. He would say there was something wrong with me. And truly what it was is I was getting no emotional support. I ran around doing all those things and I got nothing from him. When we moved, the kids were still in grade school. We moved to an area. We had a couple acres. He came home. The house was clean. The yard was manicured, all 2 acres of it. That might seem like a lot. It might not. I don't know. I did all of my grocery shopping. I did any hair appointments, anything that it needed to be done. I did it during the day, and I was there when the kids got home, and I was there when he got home from work. And he would come home and do absolutely nothing and not even recognize what I had done for the day. I really did try to do everything. You know, as a wife, I bent over backwards. I just wanted something from him. I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting anything. I wasn't getting a reaction. I wasn't getting any appreciation. I wasn't getting any kind of recognition. And when I would, you know, have a meltdown, or I would have, you know, an emotional blow up of some kind, he would turn it on me. And he would say, well, what do you want from me? And what do you expect? And or he would do the old, I'm in a rut. I've been in a rut. You know, let me get out of this, and I'll be better, and things will change. Just always somehow looking for an excuse, looking for something to fall back on. And it was a continuous cycle of that. It was a continuous cycle of me being upset, him promising things, of course, not being a man of his word. He never kept any promises, you know, having nothing but excuses. And I don't know how long it went on, but I do remember vividly a period of time where he came home and would sit in front of his computer, and that was it. I got nothing from him. The kids got nothing from him. I just think that he had a lot of mental problems. I don't even know if he knew what was wrong with him or what to do about it. I just look back on those times now, and it's just baffling to me how I dealt with that, how I didn't see it. And I just kept trying. In later years, I thought, well, you know, crying isn't working, and having fits isn't working, you know, and we would, I would have one of those meltdowns, one of those emotional meltdowns, and I would try to get him to talk to me. For years, he wouldn't even give me the courtesy of looking at me or you know, facing me or anything. I mean, he would just like get in the bed and lay with his back to me, and I would be crying and sobbing and carrying on, and he would completely ignore me. I finally got the courtesy of him at least, you know, being turned in my direction after a while. And I would tell him, I never, ever, ever went on to say, you know, I don't feel loved, I don't feel appreciated, or, you know, I feel so alone or whatever, without saying, what am I not doing? What can I do better? What am I not giving you that you can't give me what I need? What is there something I'm not fulfilling? What am I doing wrong? If I had $1 for every time I asked that question, yeah. So it was never just me, you know, it wasn't about me just harping and complaining and nagging. I wanted to know what I could do. I wanted to know what I was doing wrong. And he would never give me an answer. He would never give me an answer. That was the cycle. That was the cycle. And it just went on over and over and over again, until I got a little older, and I started to realize, well, maybe there's something I'm missing. It must be me. And I started doing a lot of reading. I started doing a lot of journaling. I'm really shocked when I look back now at the amount of journaling that I did. I was in such a haze of rush and taking care of the family and taking care of the business and doing the things that I was doing. And in the middle of all that, I look back at these journals and I think, wow, I was really throwing myself into this. And I plan on sharing some of the journal entries. I want everybody to hear some of those things and how drastically my views have changed, how much guilt I was laying on myself, how I blamed myself for all the problems, how I blamed myself for all the issues in our marriage. And I was desperate. I was doing anything I could to try to fix it. And that was the problem, is nothing I would do would fix it. Then the next step, of course, was some sort of counseling. Each counseling session was, you know, worse than the last. He never opened up. He was never honest. He would sit there red in the face. He looked like he was about to explode. He didn't like being put on the spot. He didn't like being questioned, of course, and that's what narcissists do. They don't want anybody questioning them. How could you question them? If anything, in his mind, I was the one that needed therapy. I was the one that needed some kind of help. And he would tell me that. It's, you know, the kids think you're crazy. He had me convinced of that for a while. I actually believe that somehow him and the kids understood each other and had this, relationship that I was on the outside of because they all thought I was a nut. And so over the years, I just believed all of that. And through some reading and some writing and journaling and understanding, I started to realize I don't think I'm the one with the problem. This isn't just me. This has a lot to do with him and his behaviors. And as I started to realize that, I started to become more detached. And like I said, a woman leaves mentally before she leaves physically. And that's when I checked out, because I realized this isn't about me. It's totally about him. I wasn't sure of his willingness to correct it. I hesitate to say change, because we shouldn't change who we are to be with somebody that we actually love. The unfortunate part of all that is that narcissists don't love anybody but themselves. So I was in love with somebody, and I was working on something that truly had no future and truly had no hope. He was just blind to it all. He was going through the motions and too busy breaking his own arm, patting himself on the back, patronizing me and telling me that, he didn't have time to think about all these things. He didn't have time to concentrate and worry about our relationship or our marriage, because he was so busy working and providing. That was really all he did, was provide. I never knocked him as a provider, because that was the one thing that he had right. And I believe that was an ego thing too. He had this idea that if he didn't go to work, the whole place would shut down. And we're talking about a very large company. And the sad part is truly, this is not an exaggeration, just because of the way I feel towards him now, he does absolutely nothing at work. He sits behind a desk all day. One of his jobs is to get whoever is celebrating a birthday a cake that day. He literally does absolutely nothing. He will carry on about how hard he works day in and day out. I mean, he would just come home and do next to nothing. I mean, there were times, he did things to a house, added some bedrooms or whatever, but I never heard the end of that. And anytime I wanted to make any kind of improvements, it just never ends. You're asking for so much. I think there's some pride in home ownership, and you need to take pride in where you are. And it wasn't anything that I wasn't ever willing to do or help or work on with him. And it wasn't me just giving him things to do. I thought to myself, well, he can handle this. He has the abilities to do it. Everything was an argument. Everything was an argument. Everything was a fight. I remember shortly before I finally left, we were, of course, going round and around about one of our kids. And, of course, we never saw eye to eye. He wanted to rule with an iron fist. I, of course, love my children and don't deal with them in that manner or discipline them in the ways that he wants to. We always argued about that. One of the last things he told me, because I wasn't seeing things his way with one of the kids, was that I was a dumbass. Very blatant, very cold. He looked at me, "You are such a dumbass." And at the time, I was still working. I was still running our business. I was dealing with some, fairly important people and making some fairly important moves. And all of those people respected me, and my husband called me a dumbass. That was one of the last things that I took from him, one of the last things that he said to me. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to hear that again. I do have a recording that I'd like to share. You need to hear how he dealt with the kids. It might be familiar, it might not, but it'll make things very clear if there's any gray areas about where I'm coming from with this relationship. I will share that in the future, and I will probably be answering some questions from one of our Schmarties in the next video. So thanks for joining me again, and I will talk to you soon.